Conversations being moderated by Caitlin Urso, environmental consultant at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Take it away, Caitlin.
Thanks, Brian. Happy 50th Earth Day, everyone. Thank you, NCIA, for adapting to the current state of business and providing this remote educational opportunity. I am Caitlin Urso. I work for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment as a free environmental consultant for small businesses. I specialize in helping craft breweries and cannabis businesses reduce their environmental impacts. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join NCIA, me, and a very talented panel today to discuss environmental sustainability within the cannabis industry. I'm honored to share this time with such brilliant colleagues and friends. Sarah Davis, who has her own sustainability consulting firm. Then we're going to hear from Emily Long, who is the communications manager for Rocky Mountain Reagents and has an environmental master's degree. Then we will hear from 4 marijuana cultivation companies. Our first cultivator is James Schwartz, who is a nurse and CEO of Cascade High Organics, an Oregon-based sustainable cannabis company. Our next 3 speakers are with Colorado Indoor Cultivation Operations. We'll hear from Peter Marcus, who is the communications director for Terrapin Care Station and also has a background in politics. Then we'll hear from Brandon Ray, who does compliance and sustainability for Native Roots. And last up, we will be hearing from Andrew Alfred, the chief scientist for LiveWell Enlightened Health. Andrew leads LiveWell's data-driven approach to environmental efficiency. So let's start things off by defining sustainability. Sustainability focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to also meet their needs. The concept of sustainability is composed of 3 pillars: economic, environmental, and social. These are also known as the 3 Ps: people, planet, and profits. These 3 things need to work together in order to ensure sustainability. As a business who supports sustainability, we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. We need to strategically manage the natural resources that support our core business functions so that we can sustain business growth while being an asset to our community now and in the future. So in order for a decision to be sustainable, it has to have not just environmental benefits, but benefits for the community in which you operate, and also be a smart business decision. As project manager, I am excited to announce that NCIA will be releasing an environmental sustainability white paper focused on the cannabis industry later this summer. The white paper is being written by the NCIA Environmental Committee that I lead and consists of about 20 environmental and cannabis experts. The white paper will focus on the environmental impacts, best management practices, and policy considerations for the cannabis industry needed to position the industry as a leader in environmental sustainability. I will now pass it off to Sarah Davis, who will give more of an overview of the contents of the coming white paper.
Thanks, Caitlin. Happy Earth Day, everyone. My name is Sarah Davis, and I'm the founder and CEO of SRD Consulting. I have about a decade of experience in the solar industry, and more recently worked at Tesla for a couple years building out electric vehicle infrastructure. And I'm really excited to be part of the white paper effort and to be speaking with you all today. So we're at a unique moment in time, not just in light of COVID, but as the newly or emerging industry seeks to transition from underground production into a world of land use regulation. The cannabis industry provides a unique opportunity for us to reevaluate the role of agriculture in a mechanized and globalized world. Before the founding of the United States, and even further back before the planting of the first cannabis fields, land use has been changed and driven by expanding global populations, and those populations increase pressure on our land, resources, and overall sustainability of our planet. So as we look to integrate the cannabis plant into our greater American and global economies, we must ensure that we do so thoughtfully, knowing that we can cultivate without exploitation, that we can grow without degrading the natural environment, and that it's in our best interest to take lessons learned and apply them holistically. So within the white paper, we frame both the historic, existing, and emerging industries in light of both the Farm Bill legalizing hemp nationwide and also assuming that federal legalization of marijuana is coming. We took this opportunity as a way to set the standard, not only for the industry, but as a way for the industry to set the standard globally in terms of cultivation best practices. As Caitlin mentioned, we explore several topics through the lens of impacts, best management practices, and policies. And we really let the plant lead how we organize the white paper. So we start with the soil and we look at what inputs are required in order to grow and cultivate this plant. We then go on to explore some of the impacts that the cultivation and retail and processing have on both our water, air, and energy. And then finally, we conclude with an analysis of the waste. How can we be better in terms of how we're packaging and also in what we're doing with the bulk plant waste as a result. So kind of touching on the first chapter is land use and soils. That's covered on the next slide. And really what we did, we had a great team. As Caitlin mentioned, there's about 25 of us that have been working on the white paper. And I specifically led the land use and soils chapter with a lot of insight from PhD soil scientist Judy Daniels. And really what we focused on is the fact that cultivation within cannabis is at multiple scales. So we looked at not only industrial hemp, smaller outdoor craft cultivation of marijuana, as well as indoor cultivation. I really tried to look at what are potential impacts. Some of these are ones that are impactful from agriculture in general, but really focusing on specific impacts from the cannabis plant and cannabis best practices. And one of the things that we really tried to highlight throughout this chapter is it's not all quote unquote bad news. There are a lot of positive points about the plant, phytoremediation being a key one, and that you have to make sure when you're going into cultivation that you're taking into account that this is a plant that absorbs things from the soil, from water, and holds them indefinitely. And so we really laid out a plan both for current cultivators, kind of the OG cultivators out there, as well as people that are newly entering the industry, so that they start out on the right foot, that they're thinking about things like integrated pest management over pesticides, and also provides a foundation for how we can integrate cannabis, both hemp and marijuana, into the larger agricultural framework in terms of organic certifications and the possibility of creation of new programs. In terms of water, we all recognize that it's a finite resource. I think one of the things that we really tried to head on is that sourcing of water is really key. And when you're looking at outdoor cultivation, there are some considerations in terms of where that water goes after it's been applied to the plant and what it carries with it. As well, in indoor cultivation, we have to recognize that we're putting additional demand on municipal systems, and we need to ensure that the infrastructure capacity and access is such that we can continue to expand cultivation in areas where it makes sense. Some best management practices that were addressed in the white paper as it relates to water include rainwater catchment that can impact, or that could be helpful for both indoor and outdoor cultivation, as well as some information about monitoring and sensors that you can use to just really make sure that your water usage is as tight as possible, that you're not overusing, and then ways that you can filter or recycle different types of water that you're using, whether it's condensation from your HVAC system or water that's being applied to the plant that maybe could go through a filtration system and get reapplied. And before I turn it over to Emily to touch on the last two chapters, energy is one that I personally am really passionate about. There's two sides to the coin, of course, demand and supply. And you'll hear from a lot of the cultivators we've got here today about some of the energy efficiency they've done to reduce their demand. I personally am really interested and excited about federal legalization and the renewable energy and battery storage technologies that that would unlock. So stay tuned. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Emily Long, who is a environmental policy wonk and the communications and marketing lead for Rocky Mountain Reagents.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and celebrating Earth Day today. My name is Emily Long. I have a master's in environmental sustainability and public policy. I'm currently working, as was mentioned earlier, in communications and marketing for Rocky Mountain Reagents, which is based in Golden, Colorado, and has been open since 1951, supplying chemicals to a wide variety of industries and working very hard to fairly serve the cannabis industry. So let's just jump right in here to one of the final chapters. We touch on air and impacts to air. We talk about the impacts to the air quality that need to be considered when deciding best management practices. And there are 4 major impacts to note. First, during plant cultivation, odor from terpenes and volatile organic compounds both contribute to reducing air quality. The second impact to point out is that during processing of cannabis into consumer products, the use of solvents can lead to additional air pollution. Thirdly, the electricity typically used to power indoor marijuana growing facilities releases greenhouse gas emissions, which are linked to issues of climate change. And finally, we look at the extensive transportation of cannabis products by way of carbon emitting vehicles as a result of supply chain constraints. And it is important to note that we need additional testing and data collection in order to quantify the emissions from the last 2, the electricity and the transportation used in the cannabis industry, to really fully understand and measure their impacts to public health and climate change. And as far as best management practices, the use of carbon filtration in